And I know there's lots of different modalities we're going to be talking about today. I asked Eric this question, and I'll ask it to you as well. Just I'd love to get your opinion on it. And when I asked the question, Eric responded by saying, you know what, there's lots of different things we need to figure out, all kinds of different modalities to be able to help the individual. And I asked him specifically about nutrition, if in his opinion, that was pretty much the best and biggest lever to pull to be able to help somebody. He answered again that there's lots of different ways to do it. How would you answer that question? How high up, as far as all the things that you can use to help somebody with mental disorder, how high up would you place something like nutrition?
Loaded question. And I think it's very high on the priority scale. But the way I explain it to people is there are people who are lean and mean, they're thin, they have a low blood sugar, they have a good muscle base, and they still suffer with terrible depression or anxiety, or they've had a bad concussion, or they have dementia because there's a strong family history and a link to that. And so if we beat that drum day in and day out, diet, 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 occasionally you come across those people where they have been very intentional about their diets and they still have neurological problems. So it goes back to the most important intervention is to find the weak links in the individuals that you're working with. And because we live in a society that's mostly overweight and a society that's insulin resistant and pre-diabetic and somewhat stationary, right? I'm not judging and I'm not indicting the world. I'm just saying the environment that we live in typically is a fast food, have it my way, sedentary, computer-based workout system, right? There's just not a lot there. Those individuals' diet becomes essential. It becomes very important. But I can tell you, 25% of my clients have great metabolic health. They've been very focused on the lifestyle piece and they still got problems. And so for those people, we have to go down those pathways to identify where's their weak link.
Love that. Yeah, that's a great way to answer that question. I appreciate that this is very, very nuanced. As far as like core tenets of nutrition, what are some of the things that you have come to learn or believe more strongly now than you did before? Like what would constitute kind of good nutritional principles without getting too much in the sticks of like what the actual diet has to be, if that makes sense?
Yeah, awesome question. And I've gone through iterations of how to approach this. I grew up with a practitioner, Dr. Willie, who taught all about kind of a bodybuilding style diet, which was higher in protein, higher in healthy fats, much lower in carbohydrates, and carbohydrates were very intentional. Carbohydrates were revolved around food timing. So you consume more carbohydrates during your workouts, and then you backed off the further away from your workout you got, so that we could manage insulin spikes and so forth. Now, I think that I'm sure being in the exercise world, you're familiar with muscle-centric medicine, Gabrielle Lyon's philosophy, and I've kind of taken her philosophy. And when I write a diet for someone, I'm really focused on making sure it's protein adequate. And that's a loaded statement, and there's a lot of disagreement in the medical literature about what is adequate amount of protein. So if I'm just keeping it simple for our audience, and maybe our audience doesn't need to be simple, we could dig into the weeds with this. But I'll typically say, hey, I want you to get a minimum of 100 grams of protein, and I want it to be an animal base. Because that, when you consume that, it's going to bring with it a healthy amount of natural fat as well. So we kind of tackle the protein and fat at the same time. So making it simple, look, 100 grams of protein, minimum is your base. And then from there, we identify how much carbohydrate do you need based on insulin resistance, your A1C, your level of physical activity, what your timing is, and so forth. And that's kind of my simplified way to help a client. If I only got 10 minutes to sort through this, that's kind of my basis. Start with protein, make sure it's nutritionally adequate for their activity level, and then kind of fold in your proteins or your fats and carbohydrates based on their metabolic health.
You've been hanging out with Dr. Ben Bickman down at BYU, haven't you? I knew it. I've seen
I
you
love Ben Bickman.
I've seen you in presentations and you do just as good of a job. This is a huge compliment, by the way. You do just as good of a job presenting as he does. He's one of the very best presenters I've ever seen. And he does such a wonderful job making that simple. Focus on the protein. Proteins in nature always come with fats. Focus on animal centric proteins. and just let the carbohydrates slide down to be where you can tolerate that kind of a diet, because that will address that insulin resistance, which, as he writes about and why we get sick, is the core principle of so many of these chronic diseases that we see. So I love that approach.
Yeah, thank you. Ben is a hero. I love what he has talked about. And I remember a statement he said that that the best God-given protein was dairy, was milk, because it has a little bit of carbohydrate, a little bit of fat, and a little bit of protein. And that's always stuck with me, thinking, okay, how do we get a natural food item that kind of has the spectrum? And milk is really the only one that has all three. But anyway, that's a side note. And I like Ben Bickman, so I appreciate that compliment.
He's the best. Yeah, I got to meet him in person at a conference a few months ago, and it was just amazing to see that he is every bit the character that he portrays, and is just like endlessly humble, like just an awesome, awesome guy. And his presentation
Look,
was
you just keep floating back to throwing sunshine at BYU. Nice job.
I know. I hate this. I hate this. For you too. I'll do it for you too. That's it. That's it. Maybe Kalani Sataki as well.
Okay.